Hi, everybody. Welcome back to a new episode of Closing Strong, our weekly series to take us through the end of this crazy and historic election cycle with myself, Tara McGowan, founder and publisher of COURIER, and my dear friend Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. We have such a great show for you guys this week, and I want to caveat it that we did film it in a few different segments across yesterday and today so we could bring you guys such amazing conversations. Because with us today, we have Esosa Osa, who runs an organization called Onyx Impact, really focused on how disinformation and information is affecting Black communities, and whose organization played a really big role in the US government's report and announcement this week about Russian intervention in the election. So really excited to bring that conversation to you guys, as well as a conversation with Congressman Maxwell Frost. Max is the youngest elected congressman in Washington at 25. He was elected at 25 years old. He is also hitting the ground in all of the battleground states as a surrogate for the Harris Walz campaign, talking to young people and bringing them along. We have a fantastic conversation with him coming up shortly. So really excited to dig in with you all.
Yeah, listen, I'm really excited, Tara, also about the show because it's what's emerging is we're creating this great mix between hardcore politics and what's happening in the election, and also reflections on the integrity of the conversation that we're all having every day. As part of the premise of our work together is that we want to try to restore greater information integrity and to get to a place of truth and not disinfo as we talk about. So I love the way the show's evolving. It's been a lot of fun. And I think we've got a great show for everybody today.
Simon, how are you? 40 something days out.
Yeah, and early in-person voting starts this week, Tara. It's kind of incredible. I mean, we are officially
Not
entering
everywhere.
election
Are you
season.
sure?
Election season, right? It's starting in Minnesota, South Dakota, and Virginia on Friday, and people are going to be, lining up to vote and hitting their polling locations, and real people are going to be really voting in the 2024 election. I mean, there's been a little bit of mail activity in Pennsylvania so far, but in terms of actual human beings going to vote themselves in public, it all starts Friday of this week.
It's so exciting. And Pennsylvania is right on the heels of that, right? Which we all, all eyes on Pennsylvania this year, but their early vote starts relatively soon.
Yeah, and a lot of the states, it varies, right? Just like voter registration deadlines. I mean, there's still another good month of voter registration in most places, and that's why the campaign this week has been hitting voter registration really hard. We've seen some very encouraging data from Tom Bonnier about how voter reg is beginning to really move in our direction, which is important, particularly with young women and young women of color in the recent weeks. And so we've seen sort of a encouraging voter registration surge. I think Taylor Swift has obviously helped with that quite a bit, as have other stars. I mean, Billie Eilish got into the game this week.
We are voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz because they are fighting to protect our reproductive freedom, our planet, and our democracy.
Go to iwillvote.com and make a plan to vote early.
I think what's changing about this election, we're entering a new phase. We're in the debate phase. We're in the conventions phase. We're in the Kamala's new phase. Now we're in the voting phase. It is beginning officially this week, voter reg, voting itself. There's going to be all of a sudden this election is going to feel close to us, proximate, and not far away. And I think that's going to be to our advantage because I think we are doing better in the polls than they are. We've had a really good week. We'll get into that in a second. And so this is a very good time for people to be checking into the election because we're doing much better than they are.
Yeah, no, it's election season, right? It's not about election day anymore. It hasn't been for a number of years. It really is election season, and we're in it. And you can tell what democracy nerds we are because I literally get bumps when I think about people voting. I used to remember waking up on the first day of early vote in states and feeling the energy that the polls were already open at 6 a.m. in some states. So it's really exciting. So if you do, actually, no matter where you live, you should check, find out your early vote dates, your locations if you can early vote, and vote as early as possible, which I know Simon has been beating that drum because it saves campaigns money and time. and builds momentum and energy. So vote as early as you can wherever you are.
Well, and the other thing people can do, Tara, this week is to also check your voter registration status. If you go to I Will Vote, which is a site produced by the Democratic Party,
iwillvote.com.
yeah, iwillvote.com, you can check your registration status. And you also, if you're not registered or you're in a new place, you can register. And everyone here who's watching and listening, make sure people are aware there's a simple, easy site to go to, right? A universal site for voter registration all across the country. Very easy to access, works really well. It's been around for years, very reliable. It's called iwillvote.com. That's another tool in our toolbox, right, that we can use to make sure that we create more Democrats and it makes it more likely we win this election.
That's right. And there's been a lot of polling and data, and I know our friend John Della Volpe has talked about this in the past, but one of the biggest barriers for younger folks to voting is simply not knowing how and feeling that the process is hard and complicated. And that's because, unfortunately, it is. It is in some states. Some states have gone out of their way to make it more difficult. Some bureaucratic states are hard to navigate, but there are tools like iwillvote.com and vote.org and others that have made it intentionally much easier to navigate. And it really isn't so difficult. You have to do it. So eventually, hopefully, we will have automatic voter registration in all of the states. Some states benefit from that. Some states have same day registration when you vote. These are things that makes voting easier and makes democracy stronger. But of course, there are folks that don't want it to be so easy for people to vote. So anyway, get the information you need to do it. Vote early. It's really exciting that it's starting.
Yeah.
So tell us, what is the state of the race?
So we've had a week of polling now from the debate, and it's been very, very good for Kamala Harris. I mean, again, one of the things about data is that usually data doesn't all point in the same direction. It's not in harmony. It often fights. There's some polls saying good things, some polls not saying bad things. That's not true over the last few weeks, and particularly since the debate. I mean, it's been remarkable how many polls have found almost exactly the same thing, which is Harris now ahead by 3, 4, 5 points. The race has kind of jumped in her direction by a point or two. She was up 2 to 3 points before the debate. She's now around 4 based on the polling today. We got an Economist YouGov poll, which is one of the highest integrity polls that we have. It's a weekly track that comes out every Wednesday. It's a serious poll. Last week, it was a dead even race. She's up 4 today in that poll. And then the Harris X poll, which has been this poll that's been very Republican. I mean, Trump was usually ahead in that poll by 5 or 6 points. She's up today by 4 points in that poll. There's been a 6-point shift in that poll, 4-point shift in Economist YouGov, 6-point shift in Harris X. These are huge shifts that we've seen in these polls. And so, things in the polling domain, very positive news here. We've had we haven't had much state polling, but the state polling we were up 4 in a Wisconsin poll, up 3 in a Pennsylvania poll. And so we're starting to get data in the battleground states that reflects some of the gains that she's made nationally. It's still a very close competitive election. We are in much better shape than they are. We're leading in the national data. We're in better shape in the battlegrounds. But the way I like to describe this election is that we're winning, but we haven't won yet. And we have a lot of work to go do to go win this election together in the coming months.
Yeah, we can't forget that this election really is going to come down to the people not likely choosing between the candidates at this stage, but just needing to have a good reason and be nudged and motivated and supported to actually turn out and vote. That's often what it comes down to. It's a surge in turnout of folks that don't vote often or regularly. These are the folks our newsrooms are talking to and helping inform every day at COURIER, but it really does matter. There's no laurels we can rest on here because every single vote is going to count. And the thing, I agree with you on everything, Simon. We are in such a strong position. The vibes feel really good. The polls are good. I care less about the polls, as you know, but the vibes do feel really, really good. The Harris campaign continues to raise historic sums of money and kind of continues to increase offices and more support for more volunteers to come in and help. But it really is, it's going to matter to get every single person out. The relational organizing work that folks can sign up to do just to get their friends and neighbors through tools that the campaigns all have on offer for folks that lets you actually reach out to people you know personally in your contact list, because that matters so much more than getting a cold outreach from someone you don't know or seeing an advertisement. So just get smart about how all the different ways that you can help, and don't think that it's going to take care of itself. I know we say this every cycle, but it's true. we have to win, and we have to win really big, because the one thing that does still give me pause, Simon, and I'm curious for your thoughts on it, but is like, we can't be too close in
Yeah.
one state or two states and have this make it to the courts, right?
Yep.
We've actually been through that before. Young people did not live through the year 2000. I was quite young, but I remember it really well. It might have been one of the bigger political stories for me as a kid, that and a lot of things with Bill Clinton we don't need to talk about, but I do remember that. And we know how rigged the Supreme Court is today. Trump rigged that court, Leonard Leo rigged that
Yep.
court, and that court has granted immunity to the president regardless of what crimes they could commit in the name of their formal position. And so I don't trust them. I think a lot of Americans don't trust them. And so it's I don't want to blow too much smoke up it, but like, it would be really, really, really nice and comforting to have a landslide for this historic ticket in this historic election for our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way to think about this is that if you're scared or worried about late things happening like in 2016, or any kind of manipulation that they may do, the antidote to that is to try to win the election in October, and to try to run up the score and get us, to win this election definitively, both in the polling and in the actual early vote. I mean, we're going to be getting a lot of data very soon about how many people are voting and where they're voting and what the early vote performance looks like. And this is going to be an opportunity for us to not just have Donald Trump lose on election day, but he could lose over 45 days, right? And be losing every day. And we can be grinding it into him. And which is why it's so important that people think of their volunteering and their donating as something that they have to do now, not in late October, not in early November, not on election day. I think we're going to win or lose this election in October, and how well we perform in the early vote, and whether we can sort of start putting distance between. Think of this: would you rather go into halftime in a game ahead or behind? Right? We want to go into halftime, or the third quarter ahead, and we have the power to do that. And it's really the power that, one of the things that makes this election very different from 2016 or 2020 is that we now have a very mature and sophisticated grassroots army in the Democratic Party. The people who've been out running organizations and doing grassroots work and phone calling and texting and postcarding and canvassing. We have more of that than we've ever had. It's more sophisticated, it's bigger, it's stronger, and it's kicking in. I mean, I can see it in my own work. So I think we're going to have, to use the phrase of our show, Tara, our ability to close strong is much greater than theirs. But as the vice president said, and she continually says, and I think it's one of the most interesting lines that she has about this election, is that the baton wasn't passed to her, it was passed to all of us. And really, what happens in this election, we have more, all of us as individuals, have more agency than people understand. And I think that these stories of millions of people going to work, volunteering, making calls, huge numbers of Americans voting early, exercising their franchise, these are affirming stories about the power of our democracy, right? One of the ways that we show that democracy is beating autocracy and beating illiberalism is by having this outpouring of volunteers, that people are voting early in large numbers. Every day that we get stories that lots of people are voting is a good day for our democracy. And so vote early, vote on day one, make sure you're part of the team of people that are pushing this vote as hard as we possibly can, as early as we possibly can, for all the reasons we've discussed, and make sure that you leave it all on the playing field. Because as Governor Walz keeps saying, you don't want to wake up on election day and think, man, there's more I could have done. We all have learned that lesson, right? We're way past that as a family now, right? We got to leave it all on the playing field here. It feels good, but the work that we do will really determine the outcome of this election together over the next 6 weeks.
That's right. And I love the pass the baton line. And to build on that, Simon, that I have "Yes, we can" tattooed on my arm. I had Obama write it on my arm, and I tattooed it. And for me, it was always about the we. It's never about him. It's never about one candidate or one thing. It is the collective we that we can make progress. We can build on progress. We can stave off the worst, and we can absolutely defeat MAGA and fascist wannabes like Trump. But it takes the work. And as Michelle Obama said, the other Obama at the convention, do something. Everything matters. Everybody can do something every single day. So I know you're doing a lot more than just talking about it and educating and evangelizing and inspiring. You're getting people to write postcards and donate to all these things. I'm so grateful for all the work you're doing. Simon, our teams at COURIER are doing an enormous amount too. There's so much people can do something every day.
We've got a great segment now with Congressman Maxwell Frost, young superstar of our party, who's, in addition to just being a great guy, is working his butt off in this election to speak to young voters. This is National Voter Registration Week. And so we just are really excited to hear from the Congressman about what he's seeing on the ground as he's traveling all over the country. What's the vibe out there? What is he learning? And so, Congressman, welcome. And we'd love to get your thoughts about, you've been out there working really hard, and what are you seeing on the ground?
Well, I'm really proud to be on the Vice President's National Advisory Board for her campaign. And part of what I do is travel to make sure that we connect with all different kinds of voters. And about a few days after the DNC, I went on a tour. It was a back to school tour, campuses in 4 states in 5 days. So we started in North Carolina, then I went to Arizona, then I went to Michigan, and then Pennsylvania. And we did 2 to 3 campuses per state. And the energy was amazing. I was a bit surprised, to be honest, when I got up early, on that first tour date to go to UNC Chapel Hill. We went to an event at someone's house. And so, the purpose of this tour right after the DNC was for me to go and speak with the most highly engaged organizers on campus to get them excited about growing the coalition. Then on October, a lot of surrogates will double back to these campuses and we'll do bigger events. So this is, these are supposed to be kind of smaller groups, if that makes sense. Well, we pull up, this first one has about 100 students packed into this house on I think it was like a Monday or Tuesday morning, which it's hard to get students to do anything in the morning. And they were fired up and so excited about electing the vice president to be the next president. And they were excited about making sure that we take this movement and this energy that we see online and we take it from vibes and make it into votes. And that is really what they're excited about. And what I told them is, they are the ones that are going to be responsible for taking this national movement that the vice president has started and really bringing it home on campus for their peers and for the people around them. And something I always try to tell student organizers is, that the privilege and opportunity to organize on campus is an ever fleeting opportunity. And when you leave school to go reach the voters you want to reach, you got to go knock on their doors. We got to go call them, which is all really important. And we're going to do that. But student organizers see the people they want to talk to every day on campus. And the really cool thing is it allows us to speak with them in many different ways. And so instead of inviting people to our table, we get to go to theirs. And it's something that students have a unique privilege and ability to do. And so I was just really excited. So the vibes are great, but what's even greater is students are ready to take it from vibes into votes, from online into organizing. And that's how we're going to win this thing.
That's so great to hear that the enthusiasm is just as high, if not higher, on the ground where you're going than online, because that's the question I wanted to ask you. Focused on the online space at COURIER and really understanding the need to flood the zone and to be reaching young people in as authentic ways as possible where they're spending their time. We obviously invest very heavily in TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat for Messenger to be able to reach young folks. And we did see, right, after the ticket changed and the vice president was on the top of the ticket, that we went from an insane index of pro-Trump and anti-Biden content to actually the inverse, with an enormous amount of pro-Kamala and anti-Trump content on TikTok because of the way those algorithms work. We've talked about on this show. And one of the things that I actually worry about is that because of the organic nature and the open kind of algorithm of TikTok, that, we can sort of feel that the vibes are better than they are because of the sort of concentrated hyper enthusiasm and engagement among folks, because it's hard to tell how widespread it is. So do you feel a distinction between offline and online? And what's some of sort of the best type of work you've seen happen in the online space to actually make that conversion from vibes to votes, as you said?
Well, there's a few things. Like the first thing is we have a lot of different ways to tell, is it just a mirage online? Is it real, right? And so part of it is obviously we're seeing a lot of the polling numbers. We're seeing that when young people are polled, they are overwhelmingly going to vote for Kamala Harris, and they're excited to do so. Energy has gone up. But the polls also show us this is still going to be a close race, right? So that helps to bring us down to earth per se, to really understand that we have high energy, but it's still going to take a lot of work because, believe it or not, there are a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that are excited about President Trump. He has a very cult-like base, but then there's a very significant part of the Republican Party that don't like Trump. And so they're asking themselves, do I vote for Kamala? Do I not vote? Do I hold my breath and vote for Trump? And those are some folks who are also going for as well. And you've seen, number one, two former Republican vice presidents come out and say they're not supporting President Trump, and a litany of former Trump officials saying they're not going to support, former President Trump. And so I think it just shows that the vice president has an opportunity to build a really broad coalition here, which is one of the hallmarks of the Democratic Party, is that we will have very progressive people like myself, very excited about being a part of this party. And we can have moderate folks, and we can even have conservative folks who align themselves with us, not because they agree with us on all the issues, but because they agree with us on democracy. And democracy is something that we cannot agree to disagree on. And that's what Trump wants to do. So we have a lot of ways to bring us down to earth to understand the energy is high online, but it's not just online. We got to look at how are we going to win this on the ground. And the vice president said herself, we are the underdog in this race. She is going against a former president, someone who is now going to be on the ballot for the third time, who has a lot of resources and a cult-like fan base and people who are going to show up to vote. So we got to make sure our people show up to vote as well. The other thing I'd say too, in terms of the campaign, is I'm asked what makes Kamala different. Why is this energy like this? Well, the reason why is she has done something that is rare in politics, and she has blurred the lines between culture and the campaign, and that's a really good thing. Culture is like the untapped resource of social movements and political campaigns. So she's gone from being a political candidate from a campaign to being a political figure in a political movement that is integrated within our culture. And the thing here is a lot of politicians seek to do the same thing, and they seek to use the culture to win a campaign. But that's not what Kamala's doing. She's not trying to use the culture to win. She just wants to be a part of it. She wants to be a part of the conversation. And when you do that, it's organic. And when you do that, people actually feel like, wow, this is someone who's authentic and someone who isn't shoving it down my throat or like shoving it in my face, but they're just laying out there what they believe in. And I actually agree with them. And I think, this content is funny and this content's serious. The interesting thing about the VP is she was going viral on TikTok before she became the presumptive nominee. Why? Because of the coconut tree thing and all this, which, has humor to it. But here's the thing. These humorous moments of authenticity brought a lot of people in, and then they stayed to listen to the issues and the content about what's at stake this election. And again, that's culture. I think back to March for Our Lives. I remember I was at the Orlando March for Our Lives, and I'm looking at the crowd and I see people I grew up with who I know hate politics or had never been to a political event. So I went up to some of them and I said, "Why are you here? Like, I'm just curious." Somebody goes, "Well, my friends were here, and so I came with my friends." Someone else goes, "I don't know how to explain it. I just felt like I needed to be here." Someone goes, "Ariana Grande told me to be here," right? And all of these answers showed that the March for Our Lives movement bridged that gap between cool and consciousness between culture and civics. And it's interesting because when people can't necessarily articulate why they felt like they needed to be somewhere, that's actually a really good indicator that we've gone beyond rhetoric and into the culture of a country, which again is an untapped potential. And that's what's going on with Kamala. At a lot of these events I was at on these campuses, there were the hyper engaged college Dems that are going to be at the event, but there were also groups of people showing up who came up to me and said, "Yeah, like I've never been to a political event before. I just felt like I needed to be here." That is what excites me the most.
And that's the difference between a moment, like the media was saying, she was having this honeymoon or a moment, and a movement. I believe that from the beginning. I love that. Amen to that. It's because she's just naturally part of the culture and engaged in it.
Exactly. And she's like super invested in it. Well, I'll share that. I'll share that. I don't like to share private stuff, but I think this is really interesting to know is that yesterday I spoke with her briefly, and even last week, and she had brought up, how was the tour? How was the college tour? It kind of took me off guard. I was like, wait, you knew about the college tour I did? Like my little, I mean, there's so many, but it just shows me that as a principal and as obviously the leader of the campaign and party now, she has a pulse on the campaign and on what's going on. And she's like, personally wants to be involved in it, which is not normal in political candidates, even congressional candidates, much less a presidential candidate, to know about one of the trips a surrogate did, right? And so I think it just shows that she's personally really invested in young people in the youth vote, and she like personally wants to know how'd it go, like what can we do better, what are we doing the right way. And her favorite part of my explanation was telling her people showing up who didn't, it's their first political event.
Such a great story, and I'm really I love the way you're talking about all this, and it's new and it's interesting. As a formerly young person, that to hear the way this is all playing out right now, but as you said, you bring them in and then you talk about issues when you're on campus. In addition to all the things you described, what are the things that are coming up the most from an issue standpoint? What are you hearing from folks they're most curious and interested in these events, the events that you're doing?
Well, the top issue by far on my back to school tour was housing. I mean, it's the top thing people kept bringing up to me. And another thing to back that up is I actually started one of the first congressional satellite offices on a college campus. So I have a satellite office on the campus of the University of Central Florida. We did like a ribbon cutting with the SGA and all this. And the top three issues students come for help on to my congressional official office on the campus is help with student debt relief, food insecurity, SNAP benefits, different things like that, and housing insecurity. Those are the top three people in terms of services. In terms of issues on the campaign trail, housing, the climate crisis, gun violence were the top three by far. It's the thing I kept hearing. And then a lot of students brought up other things. Obviously, what's going on in Gaza and foreign policy. There's some students who would bring that up. There's other students who want to talk about civil rights, criminal justice reform. So, there's obviously a lot of issues young people care about. And the interesting thing is, I really feel like the age of the single issue voter is really going away. Because when you ask a young person, what issue do you care about? They're not going to give you one, they're going to give you several, right? They're going to like say, well, the climate crisis and yada, 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 but also gun violence because this, and this, and housing. I get this like level of intelligence on the issues that really gives me a lot of hope for the future of our country. Because even if a young person has a difficult time articulating it, they understand that all these issues are connected. And so they understand like, okay, well, if we solve the housing issue, it's going to help us with X, X, and X, right? If we make sure that we, protect our democracy and that we expand the right to vote, it's going to help us fix the climate crisis and fight the climate crisis, right? And that just gives me a lot of hope because it means people are paying attention. I'll submit that, of course, we could do better in getting young people to go out and vote. Even though right now young people are voting at the highest numbers in the history of our country, we could still do better. But young people are voting at very high numbers compared to other generations. But I do not buy this argument that young people just are not aware or don't care about things going on. I think young people do care and they are very hyper aware of all the things going on around the world and domestically. But the thing is, when someone's hit with all this trauma and all this awareness of the issue, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to take a turn and become very apathetic to everything and not want to be involved because it's so much, or they're going to take another turn and become involved and step into their civic power. And our job as leaders, as organizers, as advocates is to help steer people and give people a political home as to where they want to be involved and how much they want to be involved. But I don't buy that young people don't care. It's just the reaction to caring, the reaction to learning about things. How do we handle that?
Is that alarm on your end?
No, that's just our voting thing.
The bells are going. The bells.
No, that's fine. And I know we're running out of time. The one last thing I really wanted to ask you about, Congressman, was we have heard so much. One of sort of the kind of storylines of this election has been the gender divide, especially among younger people. We watched a recent clip from Joe Rogan praising Vice President Harris and sort of mocking and making fun of Trump. And we know how influential he is with men of all races and backgrounds and ages. And we have heard a lot about this. Have you experienced that on the ground as much? And do you think that the gender divide is really stark with younger folks as the media has made it out to be?
Well, I don't want to completely discount the concern because numbers have shown us that, especially with certain demographics, we've seen some men shift right. I think it has to do with a few things. And I think, we need to do a better job of, in the Democratic Party, and I think we're really doing that with men that are leading in our party, like Tim Walz. But we need people to really showcase what does healthy masculinity look like? What can that mean to people who are interested in learning about that, and like consuming that kind of content and stuff? And I think for a lot of the kind of more masculine content that a lot of young men want to consume, they gravitate towards Joe Rogan, Turning Point, and like Tim Pool and all these people that for a lot of young people who are hit with issues and they pick who am I going to listen to, they can become radicalized. And so I think we need to step into that a little bit more. And I've been very encouraged by, we see this group, White Dudes for Harris, right? They just released a commercial. And at the beginning of the commercial, it says, white guys were blamed for a lot. And, some of us deserve to be blamed for a lot of different things and some of us don't. And, even though that kind of framing, some people might look at it and be like, like that doesn't hit me. For a lot of people it does hit them, and like they do feel that way, and maybe putting that framing can help them understand and reel them in to understand these bigger issues and why Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the right people for everybody, white dudes, black dudes, Latino dudes, everybody. And I think the campaign understands that, and I think showcasing that positive masculinity, what does real patriotism look like, I think what does real freedom look like, will help us with that as well. And I think the right wing, they really did and have been making a very concerted effort to bring in a lot of young men into their ranks. And I think that might be some of the reason we're seeing that. My anecdotal experience is that I haven't really seen any kind of huge shift on the ground, but I won't, that's anecdotal. I know the numbers kind of show a different thing. And so we want to respect that too.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for all that you're doing. Thanks for your inspirational leadership. And as I like to say, for all the good that we've already done, we all know the most important work is ahead of us. And I know you'll be out there leading the charge. Thank you so much for everything you're doing for all of us.
Thanks for walking the talk and running and representing and doing the campaigning, Congressman. It's so great to watch you.
Thank you so much.
And now we are so excited to be joined by Esosa Osa, who is the founder and CEO of Onyx Impact, a nonprofit organization founded to better understand how Black communities engage with information, fight harmful information ecosystems targeting Black voters. And this is going to be a very topical conversation. We talked earlier about RT, Russia Today, the Russian state-owned network that has been finally banned by Meta as part of this larger investigation out of the US government over the past few weeks of Russian intervention in this election. And we're going to talk specifically with Esosa today about how Russia has been targeting Black communities in the United States as well. So Esosa, thank you so much for joining us on Closing Strong.
Thank you all so much for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Tell us about African Stream. What is it? How did you come to identify this account, this channel, and rehash for us kind of what came out this week about it and how the work you all have been doing for months and months and months contributed to the story?
Yes, absolutely. So African Stream is an online platform that is across a wide range of different social media platforms that claims to be a Pan-African digital media organization focused on giving, voices to Africans generally. What it actually is a covert Russian government influence operation. We found out last Friday with the Secretary of State Anthony Blinken that African Stream is actually run by RT.
RT also secretly runs the online platform African Stream across a wide range of social media platforms. Now, according to the outlet's website, African Stream is, and I quote, a Pan-African digital media organization based exclusively on social media platforms, focusing on giving a voice to all Africans both at home and abroad. In reality, the only voice it gives is to Kremlin propagandists.
And Onyx Impact came across African Stream very early on this year in our overall kind of foundational research into the online information ecosystem surrounding Black Americans. And one of the platforms that we came across was African Stream. And it did not seem to us to be what it claimed to be when our researchers saw that both its leader and many of the journalists had previously worked for state-sponsored media in Iran and Russia and China. That made us pause. And in addition, despite saying that they were Africa focused or focused on Africans, they tended to move a lot of content that was about divisive Black issues in the US in particular. And they also were platforming other bad actors we were following that were actively spreading disinformation to Black communities. And so before you even got to the point where they're engaging in spreading a lot of disinformation, there are already several different warning signs and different flags for us that this account is not what it seemed to be. And so we labeled African Stream as a very likely foreign actor or foreign influence operation, and are obviously grateful to see that the State Department has really validated our work and shown and released that this actually is the case. This is another example of folks trying to divide the Black community to move Black folks farther away from the ballot box.
Can you talk a little bit about the content and how it was distributed in the US and the kind of reach you think it had? Pick an issue that they would have focused on, and then how would it manifest? What was it on? YouTube, Twitter? I mean, just give us a little bit of a description of how it actually operated.
So, and as we see across, I think, a lot of different similar accounts, African Stream still has platforms across almost every social media platform you can imagine. So they've got like 1 million followers on TikTok, 1 million on Instagram, 500,000-ish on YouTube, X, Telegram, LinkedIn, Rumble, Reddit, you name it, Patreon, all of
these are big numbers for folks who don't know.
Yeah, these are big. So they've got big followings, right? And I mean, even in my own social media community, I have friends that are retweeting or posting the videos from African Stream and have been for a while. And so it was not surprising to see them kind of grow that reach very quickly and push those divisive topics so successfully.
I was going to actually ask you, Esosa, to zoom out a little bit for us too. Why would Russia want to target Black communities?
I think this is just another example of the immense power of the Black community and of the Black vote, right? There's a reason that folks are trying to move this community, our community, farther away from the ballot box, right? Because they know how much power and influence we can have on the outcome of elections. And so this is, as disinformation is continuing to become more and more of a problem as the spread of disinformation becomes, hyperbolic in some cases, and the cost of spreading it approaches zero, while, sometimes we say the cost of spreading disinformation is approaching zero, while the cost of accessing truth is getting more and more expensive every day. When you look at what's happening across the ecosystem, and you look at these elections that are determined on the margins and what is maybe the best way to change that, you're going to look at which communities are most powerful and most able to affect that change. And so, that is one of the reasons that we are seeing increasingly sophisticated disinformation campaigns targeting Black Americans. And, what's so interesting about it is that all of Onyx Impact's research shows that Black folks are not more susceptible to disinformation than other communities. And in fact, Black folks are likely less susceptible to disinformation than other communities, because we have an innate higher level of skepticism in a lot of different types of government operations. And so, that being the case, it is also still true that if disinformation is sophisticated and targeted towards a community, it can still have an impact. And that's what you're seeing happen today.
Looking back over the last few weeks with the very, very aggressive action from the US government, and looking back even further to actions like the arrest of the founder of Telegram in Europe, and there's been significant actions in Europe that, there's clearly stepped up US government and Western government engagement to try to restore a degree of information integrity to our collective discourse. But we've seen some very promising things happen. I think for me, when I look back, in addition to the jailing of the Telegram founder and sort of the exposing of Telegram's malevolence, and the fact that this guy had been going back and forth to Russia all the time, right? Sort of belying what was really happening there in the cover story that he had. I think the shutting down by Meta of RT is a really major moment in the evolution of this process, because RT may not have had enormous reach in this country, but man, does it have enormous reach in Latin America and in Spanish in particular and other parts of the world. And, it operates in essence as an independent media organization in many countries. And now that we have labeled it in the US as an enabler or as integrated part of Russian intelligence, and for Meta to have now banned it from all of their platforms, right, all around the world, this was an incredible blow to the Russians that I'm sure that they are still stunned by. I mean, I don't think that in any, and particularly right before this election, and there were lots of other elections this year, can you reflect? I mean, as you do your work every day, when you have these aspirations, like there are things that I hope happen, just reflect a little bit back on what happened with Meta this week, because it seemed almost like, wow, that's really a big moment for us, right, in this whole thing. I just to get your thoughts on on what Meta did this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a monumental moment in this fight for truth and freedom in many ways. And I think that the actions by the State Department are to be commended. And I would hope that once that type of information came out, that Meta would take the actions that it did, and I'm very, very happy. And yes, while it is as you said, a significant blow to Russia, absolutely. And more importantly, this is just a major win for democracy and for all of us who believe that every community deserves access to truthful, accurate information, and that can allow us to make our own informed opinions. This is the type of action that needs to be fundamentally taken. You all are experts. We all know that disinformation works in a very similar way, regardless of your background, your education, what have you. And that is that the more times you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it's true, and the more likely you are to believe other people believe it's true as well. And so, as I often say, if the President of the United States came out every day and said that the sky is green, we would all eventually start walking outside and being like, I'm not sure. And what that fundamentally means is that disinformation is a problem of amplification. It's a problem of repetition. And so when you can shut off such a major valve for that internationally, the compounding effects are so incredibly large. And so one of the things we're hoping for is to get folks more focused and aware that this is not just happening to certain audiences. This is happening in Black communities as well. Like, I'm not sure how many folks even know that African Stream had such a large impact in the U.S. Black online spaces that we were monitoring, but these are the types of actions that are needed.
I am curious, something else with disinformation and bad actors and, the work that you guys do at Onyx so deeply is like, you have to go everywhere. You have to find ways to navigate around and through algorithms to be able to identify bad actors or suspicious accounts and things of that nature. And it can feel like a really, really, really endless game of whack-a-mole. And I'm curious if that's changing with some of these bigger accounts that have been invested in with bigger corporations and adversaries, like through Russia Today, where this channel in particular was connected, or if it still feels like if it's an incredibly sort of decentralized network of these. That I'm curious how you guys approach that. How many more accounts like African Stream do you think that you will identify and need to sort of create notice for, or are they getting bigger and kind of easier to identify?
So that's an awesome question, and I think it has a couple of different layers to it. Yes, absolutely. Like it is an immense amount of work to consistently be monitoring what this broader ecosystem looks like and who the actors at play are. And what we are seeing is, and what we try to focus on are kind of the central hubs of who gets the information first, who's most likely to post it, when are they most likely to have the most reach, and what is still the case, and what I don't believe will continue to be the case is that there are still those kind of central hub accounts, right, that are much more likely to be spreading this type of disinformation. There are so many accounts that are tied or following or what have you that are also engaged in similar operations. But what we try to do is focus on those central hubs. But again, as the cost of spreading disinformation approaches zero, we're going to get many more. We're seeing of those central hubs pop up. It's getting in many ways harder, especially with what AI is kind of doing to this entire field. So right now, I would not come close to calling it manageable, but what it is right now is we at least have a decent understanding of what that ecosystem looks like. But what that ecosystem will look like in 6 months to a year from now is anyone's guess.
I have to, because Esosa, I know how deeply you have worked in the state of Georgia. While we have you, I've got to ask, because Georgia has come on the map again in a big way for Democrats, one of the most competitive battlegrounds, just how you're feeling about Georgia. And obviously, Georgia will come down to Black folks showing up and voting to the degree that they can, because I know that there are some tough laws there. But so I'm sure that the disinformation is also playing a big role there, but would love just your take on Georgia, since it's very much back on the map with the Harris-Wallace ticket.
I think that's the number one thing, that it is very much back on the map with this change in the top of the ticket. And we're seeing, numbers come out. The AJC poll just recently came out showing the race is essentially tied in Georgia. And so once again, as you said, it's going to come down to communities of color, to the Black vote, to the AAPI vote, to the Spanish communities vote, the Hispanic communities vote, to all of these core groups, that we need to go and make sure that we're earning the vote of every single person, that we're treating every single voter like they are a persuadable voter and need to hear what our message is. But I think, working in Georgia politics all these years, I am filled with nothing but hope. And I operate from a sense of joy every day. Like I've seen, Black organizers in the South elect a Black senator, elect the first Jewish senator. I know it's possible. I've seen this change. And so I have nothing but faith in Georgia voters and nothing but Black joy to share with all of you.
Absolutely. Black voters in Georgia, in my opinion, delivered us the Senate and the White House in 2020. So I welcome them to do it again for us in Georgia. We need you. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the incredible work that you're doing that no one else really was doing. I know that in this ecosystem, it's so important. I'm so grateful you stepped up to it. It's not easy work. It's not fun work, but it's so important. So thank you. And thanks for educating us a bit as well.
Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Really incredible, insightful conversations with Esosa and Maxwell this week, and always with you, Simon. A pleasure. I want to give a quick shameless plug on COURIER's behalf that we are going to be hosting a big event in DC next week before we record the next episode of Closing Strong. It's called From Vibes to Votes, which is so funny. I was chuckling when Congressman Frost actually used that line in our conversation. But we are going to have a really, really amazing event. Simon is going to be participating in it. I'm going to be interviewing Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, and we are going to live stream it. So if you go to COURIERnewsroom.com, you can get information about it. But really excited about that. And maybe we'll have some highlights next show. But this has been great, Simon. We are less than 7 weeks out now.
It's exciting. I mean, the election's here now. And the whole goal of this show, Tara, is that we want to help everybody close strong. And I think we can together. We should be very enthusiastic about the opportunity in front of us. We just have to keep our head down, keep doing the work. And I think we can all have the election that we all want to have.
Thank you, Simon. And thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We'll see you next week.
See you, everybody.